Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 6th Edition, Index Card RPG, and its Normcore approach to fantasy, and what this means for Dungeons & Dragons, the idea of decolonizing Dungeons & Dragons. Alright, so one of my biggest things I've been thinking about is this idea that really came up in like 2018. It was a big topic on Twitter, which is decolonizing Dungeons & Dragons, kind of breaking it off from European medieval theme, and in many ways breaking it off from Tolkien, from J.R.R. Tolkien, right? So I hated this idea when I first heard it. I think, I understood, like, okay, the intention is good here. They want to make it more multicultural. And, right now, this is, it's very European. Dungeons & Dragons has a really European feel. And maybe we can open this up so that more cultures are included in the mythos that that Dungeons & Dragons is being fueled by, right? I think that's a really noble, I think that's a noble goal, right? And I think that's a good thing, right? So one of the reasons why we're talking today is Index Card RPG has really gone down this road, but it did it in an incredible way that I think has to be like. So this is going to be a big topic for Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition. I think, and 5th edition I think really is still really sitting right square in that middle, European medieval fantasy setting. And they have done a few things that have broken the model, right? So there's more images of different genders within the game, and you are seeing a wider diversity of people's heritages within the game, right? So more people of color, things like that, right? But there's going to be essentially, I think they're very strongly for Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition. We're going to be looking at a kind of a demand and a desire to make this more significant in the upcoming game, right? In 6th edition, right? So I think Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition has got to look at what Index Card RPG has done. So I think what Index Card RPG has done, I really love it. I'm so really down with Index Card RPG's overall milieu, right? And part of it is this Normcore approach to fantasy, right? So, and I want to kind of detail what Index Card RPG is doing, what Brandish Gilhelm is doing with Index Card RPG to deliver a Normcore fantasy. Now, that's not his term; that's my term. Normcore is it's actually an apparel style grouping, right? And what it is it's when people wear clothes that look normal, they're comfortable, they fit well, they're not tight, they're not uncomfortable. And Normcore is a style, right, where you are comfortable, your clothes fit well, and yet at the same time you are actually actively pursuing style, right? And I really think that's what Index Card RPG has. It has a Normcore fantasy, right? Now, what has it done to do this? Well, one of the things is it makes all elements within the fantasy, and all this is my opinion, right? This is my breakdown of what they're doing, right? So what they're doing is they're going more shallow on almost everything, right? And so, for instance, a great example of this is, okay, this is the biggest question you get whenever you go to change a fantasy setting. Are you keeping human, dwarf, elf? That is the core. That is the core of Tolkien's fantasy, right? Like, the dwarves are really antithesis to the elves, and they have this really distinct, rich culture. The elves are really antithesis to the dwarves. They have this rich, robust culture. The humans are, we don't really need, nobody needs to tell us what human culture are. We are human, right? So you have these really core cultures, right? Now, Index Card RPG Index Card RPG preserves human, dwarf, elf. Okay, it's there, right? So it's still recognizable as fantasy, right? But one of the things they do is they step it back. And really, all you really get with dwarf and elf is dwarves are shorter and stockier. Elves are taller and more willowy. And forest and mountain, right? Elf equals forest, dwarf equals mountain, right? But it removes a ton of detail, right? Like, so, like in Tolkien's books, the way the dwarves braid their beards is a big deal. The sigils that are on their shields is a big deal. How they mine is a big deal. The elves, like their history, their afterlife aspects, their nature preservation aspects, all these, there's some like really deep cut, like, hey, this is a specific, this is a really specific, this is a specific structure for these heritages of dwarf and elf, right? But in Index Card RPG, all that is rolled back, right? And it is just a really straightforward. Dwarves have a different build, right? They're shorter and stockier. Elves are taller and willowier, and elves are connected to forest. Dwarf are connected to mountain. Period. Done. Right? Now I hear you're like, well, wait, that's worse, right? Well, at initial glance, you could think that, right? But it actually is not the case. One of the things this does is when you step this back, right? One of the things you do is you leave room for other things, right? So how does Index Card RPG fill in the gap of the lack of depth on, dwarves and elves and humans, right? That other games have, right? Like Symbaroum is a good example. Symbaroum has super, super deep, unique dwarf and elf heritages, right? And, what their areas look like and what their history is look like. And all that stepped back in the Index RPG, right? Well, one of the things they're doing is to fill in the gaps when they add new things. Like a perfect example of this is there are these in Age of Snakes, which is it's a world book, right? It's actually an adventure book set in Alfheim in a specific time. Alfheim is like the Faerun of Index Card RPG. And Age of Snakes has the villains are these snake men, right? And by the way, the females, they're much larger and they're actually really different than the snake men themselves. They're almost like bee queens, right? So generally it's really unusual for the player characters to fight snake women. There are snake women, but snake men are like the villains. And one of the things is like the villains are these snake men, right? And I'm like, snake men? Like, it's just kind of like, it's so shallow, right? Like, it's just snake man, that's all you're doing, right? But as you get into it, right, he actually, Index Card RPG and Brandish Gilhelm really invite you in to this exploration of snake men as villains, right? And they really do show you what a snake man reign is like, right? By showing you locations, by showing you weapons, by showing you their spells, by showing you their non-player characters, their leaders, their template fighters, all that kind of thing. And it's beautiful. It's really, really well done. And one of the things I liked is rather than basing a heritage off of basing kind of a villain template off of a human heritage, which could be very problematic, right? You're using animals, right? And so, like, one of the things Index Card RPG, it's a small thing, but it seems like a small thing, but the ramifications are huge, right? So, snake men, frog men, right? These are, Index Card RPG goes a lot deeper on things that are already in our world, right? Lunar cycles are used really well, right? And so basically when they're stepping it back and they're pulling away from this very European medieval structure, their Index Card RPG is embracing just average elements of our world, right? Our own astrology, our own astronomy, or not astrology, our own astronomy, right? What about stars and how the constellations show in the sky? Is that part of magic? Yes, right? Gravity is like a major force is included in magic, right? And the idea that when you are adding to the Index Card RPG world, you're going to take base elements from our own world, right? So, like, for instance, we don't have them yet, but I think, there could be bear folk, right? Ursine, right? It would be added. And it would fit. In Index Card RPG, it would really, really fit, right? A good example of a faction that was presented in Age of Snakes is there's these desert people, right? And the desert people are, essentially, it's super shallow, right? It's just turbans and scimitars, right? And it doesn't go any further than that. And this is so brilliant. It's another reason why I love Index Card RPG is in Dungeons and Dragons, right? So you're like, hey, we need to show people of color in this book, right? And one of the things that's amazing in Index Card RPG is our Index Card RPG is so spare and so elegant that its art template is white, black, red, period. The vast majority of non-player characters and the NPCs that are shown in the book are drawn in black and white, right? And one of the things this means is that when you show a character, you don't really know what heritage they are. You don't know if this is coming from an Asian heritage or a Hispanic heritage or a European heritage. And that's a good thing. They're just humanoid, right? And you could tell the difference between a snake person and a desert person, right? But you can't tell if that desert person is like Caucasian or Asian or Hispanic or has African descent, that kind of thing. And it's really freeing and wonderful. It's really it's such an interesting approach to it all. And so, for instance, the desert people, they have turbans and they have scimitars, right? But there's not enough exploration of a Middle Eastern culture to be, in my opinion, what would, to get into the area where you're like, wait, is this offensive? Is this cultural appropriation, right? It's just a flourish. It's not going and grabbing huge portions and really sacred things and really special things and taking it from that, from that heritage, right? And to me, it's just a light touch. It's a really unique approach. And like a good example, like the desert people, they ride beetles, right? So, and also there are giant insects in Alfheim, giant insects. And so like Index Card RPG presents giant insects as a major threat, right? And I love this because, they're like, hey, let's explore what it means to be a super dangerous ant. Let's explore what it means to be a super dangerous bee, right? And the first time you see it, you're like, wait, why isn't there some weird, capybara creature here, And my point is, this normcore approach to fantasy, I was super against this when I first heard about it and the idea of decolonizing Dungeons and Dragons. But the Jewish people have a saying. They say, "Do and you will understand." And I think here with Index Card RPG, he's way ahead of Dungeons and Dragons. He's like, and that's the thing I love. Brandish Gilhelm in Index Card RPG, he is answering questions and philosophical discussions that are happening on Twitter with actual product, right? And he's able to create products so quickly and with limited time and limited resources that he can be responsive to these incredibly broad subjects and questions, right? And I really feel Index Card RPG is very much serves as a template for how to go about this and how to back off detail from established European and medieval template ideas. Establish it more in things that are fully human for every culture. Every culture has interactions with animals. Every culture has interactions with the sun and the moon. Every culture has interactions with frogs. It's a really light touch. It's an incredibly interesting approach. And the other thing is, it is going toward this really super deep topic in this fun, light, winsome way. And I just really feel like the future of Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition, a super fast playing, super smooth, less complex, more inviting tabletop role-playing game already exists. Everything that Dungeons & Dragons wants to accomplish has already been accomplished with Index Card RPG. The only thing Index Card RPG is missing is scale, right? Dungeons & Dragons has the scale, but they don't have this simple, elegant, inviting game, right? Index Card RPG has a simple, inviting, elegant game, but it doesn't have the scale. That's a match made in heaven. That is a beautiful marriage of scale and amazing design, right? And so I really am hoping that Kate Welch will look over and see what's happening with Index Card RPG and understand that the scale is the reason the scale is not missing is just people have a hard time with brilliant things, right? Like, Firefly, one of the most brilliant science fiction series ever, canceled after the first season, right? And I really feel Index Card RPG, it's not canceled, right? It's still moving, but it doesn't have the scale it deserves, right? And Dungeons & Dragons does not have the amazing design it deserves to have, right? Index Card RPG succeeds on so many levels, and this idea of a decolonized Dungeons & Dragons, it is beautifully, beautifully illustrated on how you could approach this in Index Card RPG. And I really encourage all of you to take a look. They have a quick start that's free, and there's a lot of ways to kind of explore the material of Index Card RPG on a lower budget, but honestly, the game isn't even that expensive. If you haven't picked it up, definitely pick it up. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion on the topic. What's your take? Have you seen other games that do this well, that really do a good job of this simple, light, elegant approach? I'd love to hear what you've seen in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.